What happens when one of the biggest action stars of the 90s teams up with a Hong Kong action legend for a Hollywood film built around the idea of hunting people for sport? Out of that brutal premise came a project that pushed violence and spectacle further than most American action films were used to at that time. So how did this story about hunting men for sport go through wave after wave of cuts, deal with clashing edits, and still end up a huge success? Let's find out. This is the story of Hard Target.
Jean-Claude Van Damme is the Hard Target. You miss me?
The concept for Hard Target began when writer Chuck Ferrer set out to turn classic survival tales into a modern action thriller about human prey and the person who fights back. When he started working on the story that became Hard Target, he did not land on the final concept in one attempt. He first took ideas from The Naked Prey. That script failed to click, so he tried a new angle inspired by aliens. That second attempt later turned into the comic Virus instead of a feature. During pass number 3, he went back to Richard Connell's The Most Dangerous Game and built a new draft from that hunt premise. At that point, the structure finally worked. The script would follow a man who runs deadly contests for paying clients and the drifter who gets pulled into that world. Now back in Hong Kong, John Woo just finished Hard Boiled, and he accepted an offer to work in the United States. Universal chairman Tom Pollock had reached out after seeing The Killer and spent a difficult stretch convincing the studio to let Woo direct a full feature film for them. Yet they were worried about a director with limited English guiding a large production, so they arranged for Sam Raimi to be present during the shoot as a safeguard just in case something went wrong. Once Woo came into the United States, he read many scripts. Some offers were solid, others leaned on martial arts in ways he no longer wanted to repeat. So the draft of Hard Target stood out to him. Woo did say that the plot itself did not feel like his older work, yet he planned to shoot it using a way that carried his trademark energy. The eventual story of Hard Target would focus on Chance Boudreaux, an ex-Marine without steady work who ends up helping a woman look for her missing father in New Orleans. Their search uncovers hunts organized for the wealthy so they can hunt homeless veterans for sport. Once Woo was hired and focused on Hard Target, he still kept his own idea for what he wanted from his lead. His first choice for Chance Boudreaux was actually Kurt Russell, but Russell wasn't available at that time, so that option closed. And it was at that point that Woo accepted Van Damme in the main role, going back toward the choice Universal had wanted from the start. That also made the production set the action in New Orleans, so the location choice could give Van Damme Cajun roots, which made his accent feel natural inside the story. Once the lead was set, the rest of the cast began to form around him. Yancy Butler was chosen to play Natasha Binder. Hard Target became her cinema debut, and it was the part that helped her move straight into more action-driven roles like Drop Zone and Fast Money. For the chief villain, the production chose Lance Henriksen. When he watched Woo's earlier films, he spoke about how much he liked their creativity and the balletic way they handled violence. Arnold Vosloo joined the film as Pick Van Cleef, Fouchon's partner in the field and the man who leads the armed crew during the hunts. The surname was chosen as a reference to actor Lee Van Cleef. The production also made use of people already close to the story. Writer Chuck Ferrer appears on the screen as Douglas Binder, the homeless veteran whose death sets the plot in motion. Willie Carpenter played Elijah Roper. Chance's friend on the street also has a Special Forces past. Wilford Brimley plays Uncle Clarence Duvet, the relative in the bayou whose home becomes a brief safe point and who later rides in to help during the final showdown. The music for Hard Target came together in post-production after the action and editing were already in place. The score was handled by Graham Revel, who was brought in to write and shape the soundtrack for the finished cut of the film.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Hard Target reached cinemas in the United States in August 1993 and arrived as John Woo's first American feature. The film opened in second place, and it went on to earn over $74 million worldwide. The reaction from critics at the time was mixed. Many praised the stunt work and the gunplay, while calling the story thin and the lead performance limited. Roger Ebert described Hard Target as not very smart and not very original, but technically strong, with impressive action that never rose above competent genre work. Gene Siskel also responded negatively, saying that the direction showed skill, yet the script and Van Damme's acting left the film without much substance. Other reviewers echoed that split. Janet Maslin wrote that Van Damme still relied on blank face posing even as Woo shot him in the most flattering way possible. Variety called the film a brisk and sometimes brilliant action piece held back by a B-level script and standard characters. The Washington Post noted a few flashes of Woo's style, like slow-motion moments and bold explosions, but felt that his creative presence was largely held back. Filming began in 1992 with the production based in New Orleans. The film had 74 days of production time, but Universal forced a schedule that allowed only 65 days of shooting. The tighter window put pressure on John Woo while he tried to deliver big action in real locations, including sections of the French Quarter. The studio also pushed him to soften the violence and reduce the body count compared to what they had seen in his Hong Kong work. At the same time, Woo was still getting used to working in English. He had not fully mastered the language yet, so it took time for the cast and crew to adjust to his way of explaining ideas. When he struggled to describe a shot to cinematographer Russell Carpenter, he used strong references instead, telling him that a particular angle would be the Sam Peckinpah shot so Carpenter could understand the mood he wanted. Lance Henriksen later said there was a gradual move from seeing it as a Van Damme vehicle to recognizing it as a John Woo film. Action scenes came with a real risk. The weapon fire around the camera was intense enough that the crew designed a new bulletproof plexiglass shield which could bolt directly onto the camera rig. Russell Carpenter had a hard time with some of the bigger sequences. He later picked out the Mardi Gras Parade warehouse as one of the toughest locations because the space had strange shapes and deep shadows. Not every scene that was filmed made it into the final cut. A love scene between Chance and Natasha was shot but was removed during editing. Another deleted moment showed Chance and Uncle Duvet celebrating their reunion by singing and dancing together. That scene didn't make it into the final version either. There were also smaller behind-the-scenes touches as well. Yancey Butler's fear of snakes meant the production had to use a mechanical rattlesnake instead of a real one. The animal handler that was originally brought in for the job, Jim Brockett, still ended up on screen as the man caught in Chance's rattlesnake trap. Around the set, Wilford Brimley became known for using a fart machine to prank other cast and crew members during downtime. The action also led to a serious accident. During the motorcycle sequence, Van Damme lost control of the bike on a sharp turn, and both performers ended up in hospital. After filming, Hard Target moved into the long fight for its rating. Woo was under contract to deliver a film that carried an R rating for Universal. When the production first presented the cut to the Motion Picture Association, the response was an NC-17 rating due to the level of violence and intensity. Woo re-edited the film several times in response, and the board never gave him direct notes about which specific moments had to go. He went through 6 re-edits for the ratings process. During this stretch, Van Damme also commissioned his own version of the film. His cuts removed entire characters and moments to make space for more scenes and more close-ups of Chance. When asked why, he said the audience paid to see him rather than a Lance Henriksen movie. The ratings board finally agreed to an R rating after 20 cuts were made. Amongst those changes were trims to the opening chase and the Mardi Gras warehouse material. Later on, Woo spoke about Hard Target as a troublesome film to make, though he remained pleased with how the action worked on screen. He explained that he tried to fuse Hong Kong-style elements with romantic touches and a modern Western feel. Looking back, he felt that he might have been too ambitious, and he noted that some viewers in the early audience screenings even walked out during the more violent scenes. Hard Target moved from cinemas into home viewing in 1994 when it arrived on Laserdisc and VHS. It did well in that market, ranking amongst the top-selling Laserdiscs and amongst the most rented tapes during that year. DVD releases followed a few years later, along with bundle packs that grouped Hard Target together with other Van Damme films like Time Cop, Street Fighter, Lionheart, Sudden Death, and The Quest. Kino Lorber released a 4K Blu-ray that includes an unrated director's cut and the US theatrical version, plus additional interviews. For any viewers that want to add Hard Target to their collection, I've added a link in the description below, and there should also be a card popping up on screen to help you check it out. Hard Target came back in 2016 when Universal released Hard Target 2. The follow-up puts Scott Adkins in the lead with Robert Nepper and moves the action to Myanmar. It was an okay action film, but it didn't live up to Hard Target standards. Now, the original Hard Target sits near the very top of Van Damme's work. The action feels sharp, the story is easy to follow, and Woo's style fits Van Damme perfectly. And let's not forget Van Damme's mullet, which is a part of why people still smile when they talk about it.
What happens when a face-swapping sci-fi script gets stuck in development hell, then lands in the hands of a Hong Kong action director with a flair for doves and slow-motion shootouts? It had been written off as too weird, too risky, but with John Woo at the helm and Travolta and Cage trading identities, it became something unforgettable. So how did Face Off go from a scrapped Stallone project to one of the wildest hits of the 90s? Let's find out. This is the history of Face Off. In 1990, screenwriters Mike Werb and Michael Colleary heard about a hang gliding accident involving a friend of a friend who had to have his face removed for reconstructive surgery. That chilling detail stuck with them. What if modern surgery could let someone swap identities, literally? They built their screenplay around that question. Blending inspiration from James Cagney's White Heat, they imagined a cop so obsessed with catching a terrorist that he undergoes radical surgery to impersonate him, only for the tables to turn. It was half identity thriller, half operatic tragedy, with a face-swapping hook that needed enough science fiction to seem plausible. So in the summer of 1990, they wrote Face Off as a speculative script, setting it in a near-future world where such technology felt possible. Warner Brothers optioned the script in '91, and that's when Hollywood did what Hollywood does. It tried to cast it with the biggest names on the planet. Over the next 3 years, as the script sat in limbo, the studio floated a range of A-list pairings: Stallone and Schwarzenegger, Michael Douglas and Harrison Ford, Alec Baldwin and Bruce Willis. The idea of two action icons literally becoming each other was too tempting to ignore. For a while, it looked like Stallone and Schwarzenegger might happen, but with Stallone already filming Demolition Man, concerns grew that Face Off would be too similar. Director Rob Cohen, originally attached to the film, tried to steer the project toward younger leads, but Werb and Colleary pushed back, arguing that the story demanded seasoned actors with emotional history, not babyface stars. That disagreement never had a chance to play out. By 1994, the rights expired and the script went dark until 1996. That year, Paramount Pictures dusted off the script and took a new shot. They brought in legendary Hong Kong action director John Woo, fresh off his American hits Hard Target and Broken Arrow. Woo brought a different vision. He pitched a world 5 minutes in the future, just heightened enough to sell the surgery, but grounded enough to feel real. By cutting the futuristic sets and gadgets, they slashed an estimated $20 million from the budget and focused everything on character, emotion, and explosive action. Naturally, the studio was nervous. Without a sci-fi backdrop, would anyone accept face-swapping surgery at face value? The filmmakers weren't concerned. They believed that if the emotional core worked, the audience would go along with the rest. It wasn't about scientific plausibility, it was about human obsession. It was about a man becoming his enemy and trying not to lose himself in the process. Once the story was reshaped and the tone set, all that remained was finding two actors to pull it off. It wasn't just about action, it was about transformation. Nicolas Cage had read the script and was enthusiastic about playing the larger-than-life villain, with the bonus that he'd also get to play the hero for half the film. Paramount, however, wasn't fully convinced. The studio insisted on pairing Cage with a younger co-star, and their top choice was Johnny Depp. According to industry lore, Depp initially assumed Face Off was a hockey movie. Once he read the script, he passed. That left Cage still eager and the co-lead spot wide open. John Woo, already signed on to direct, brought in John Travolta. The two had just worked together on Broken Arrow. With both actors locked in, the casting was finally complete. One casting decision came together by chance. Director Nick Cassavetes dropped by the set and ended up walking into a role. Woo offered him the part of Dietrich, one of Castor Troy's gang associates. Cassavetes shaved his head and filmed the scenes as a favor.
You don't want to take his face?
Yes. His face.
When Face Off hit theaters, it made an immediate impact, opening at #1 and holding strong in a crowded summer stacked with blockbusters. By the end of its run, it had brought in over $245 million worldwide. Not bad for an R-rated action movie about face swapping. Critics surprisingly didn't just tolerate it, they embraced it, with praise focused on its leads and the direction. Both leads were called out for their full-tilt performances, and John Woo's stylized action brought a level of precision and flair that made even the wildest scenes feel intense and larger than life. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars, calling the premise utterly absurd, but noted how cleverly Woo and the actors made it work. Empire went all in, giving the film a rare 5-star rating and calling it a top contender for best action movie ever made. There were some critics who called the whole thing idiotic, while others just rolled their eyes at the premise. But even the skeptics had to admit it delivered. The film's wild energy and unapologetic commitment to its own insanity earned it a long tale of admiration. For a movie built on a premise that stood apart from anything else in theaters that year, Face Off quickly climbed near the top of the action genre. But behind the camera, the production was just as ambitious as what ended up on screen. One of the most dangerous sequences in the film, the final speedboat chase, was pulled off almost entirely without digital effects and was filmed over 4 weeks. On one of the first days of shooting, the crew accidentally sank a boat. Thankfully, multiple boats were on hand. For the explosive mid-air collision at the end of the scene, the team built a ramp and used a hidden driver to launch it. One of the biggest sequences to shoot was the airport hangar shootout, where Archer finally corners Castor. Nicolas Cage actually performed a stunt where he's blasted backwards by a jet turbine, rigged with a harness and wire work. Weapons Master Rock Galati remembered Cage being surprisingly hands-on, saying he handled the weapons and choreography like someone who had been doing it for years. Designing Erewhon Prison was a world-building task of its own. The production transformed the defunct Eagle Rock power plant into the film's high-tech detention center. The production had to repaint the entire structure and lay out a custom electric floor across the massive space. But the acting presented its own challenge. Travolta and Cage spent a lot of time together, studying each other's gestures and dailies to pull off the body swap illusion. The effects team didn't just build props, they built lifelike doubles of Travolta and Cage, complete with visible veins, tiny hairs, even pulsing skin. It was so convincing that Travolta was freaked out just looking at it. There was also some initial pushback over Woo's desire to include doves in the climactic church shootout. A production manager didn't like the idea of releasing birds on set, telling Woo no doves. He was not happy. The next day, a compromise was reached. He could use the doves as long as he didn't wait for them to do something perfect. Woo agreed. There were other quirks. Travolta, a certified pilot, insisted on flying his own plane to a remote desert airstrip for filming. Cage, meanwhile, had severe acrophobia during production. And then there was the ending. Studio executives were nervous, calling the idea of Archer adopting Castor's son a European ending. At one point they were told the scene would be dropped, but John Woo pushed to keep it, and the writers, who loved the ending, were eager to shoot it anyway. The turnaround came after test screenings. An astonishing 2/3 of the audience comment cards asked, "What happened to that little boy?" The studio conceded that the adoption scene was necessary for emotional closure, and the poignant ending was retained. After tearing it up at the box office, Face Off found a second life on shelves. The film was released on VHS and DVD and sold over 4 million units, a massive number for its time. In the years that followed, it remained a steady performer, with multiple reissues across new formats. A special edition Blu-ray was released, including bonus features that gave fans a deeper look into the film's stunts, story, and on-set chaos. Eventually, it got the full 4K treatment, polishing every explosion and slow-motion gunfight for modern screens. So how did Face Off go from a shelved sci-fi oddity to one of the most talked-about action films of the 1990s? Because someone finally stopped second-guessing it. After years of development limbo, mismatched casting ideas, and studio indecision, Paramount let the story be what it was. They gave it to a director who understood scale and spectacle. They trusted 2 actors who weren't afraid to go big, switch roles, and meet the concept on its own terms. The result wasn't just a movie that worked, it was a movie that shouldn't have worked, but did. What happens when the writer of Speed teams up with its producer for a second time? This time handing the reins to a Hong Kong action legend for a thriller about stolen nuclear weapons. The studio was confident, the budget was massive, and the director brought his trademark style to the American mainstream. But between the rewrites, cuts, and studio pressure to keep it light, the final blast looked a little different than planned. So what happened? Let's find out. This is the history of Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow was conceived in the early 90s during a wave of Hollywood interest in explosive action films. Riding the success of Speed, Fox struck a deal with screenwriter Graham Yost for his next project. That film would turn out to be Broken Arrow, reuniting Yost with producer Mark Gordon. They built the story around that military term. In real-world terminology, it refers to an incident involving a lost nuclear weapon that doesn't pose a risk of nuclear war. The actual term that should have been used is empty quiver, but that didn't exactly scream blockbuster appeal. Fox saw the potential for another weapons-grade thriller and moved the project into development. They tapped Hans Zimmer to handle the score, bringing his signature sonic punch to the action. Dwight H. Little, known for Marked for Death and Rapid Fire, was initially attached to direct, but he left the project after being offered Free Willy 2. That exit opened the door for the team to secure Hong Kong director John Woo to helm the film. Woo wasn't just another director for hire. By the mid-90s, he was already a legend in Hong Kong cinema. With classics like A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, and Hard Boiled, Woo brought a distinct cinematic language built around moral conflict, stylized violence, and operatic visuals. His transition to Hollywood began with Hard Target, but Broken Arrow gave him a bigger budget and was the kind of setup that played right into Woo's wheelhouse. The story of Broken Arrow followed Major Vic Deakins and Captain Riley Hale, 2 U.S. Air Force pilots assigned to a stealth bomber training mission over the Utah desert. During the exercise, Deakins betrays Hale, ejects him from the aircraft, and crashes the plane, all to fake the destruction of 2 live nuclear warheads. Deakins and his mercenaries then retrieve the weapons and plan to ransom the US government, triggering a desperate chase through desert canyons, mines, as Hale teams up with a park ranger to stop him. From its conception, Broken Arrow was designed to be a character-driven action film built on betrayal, military hardware, and escalating tension. Casting the movie involved a few significant pivots, especially when it came to the film's 2 leads. Initially, Fox wanted John Travolta to play the hero, but Travolta had other ideas. He pushed to play the villain instead. The producers agreed, and the shift had a ripple effect. With Travolta taking the antagonist role, the part of Hale went to Christian Slater, making the character younger, less experienced, and more of an underdog in contrast to Travolta's dominant screen presence. Slater's casting brought a youthful, everyman energy to Hale, reinforcing the film's mentor versus protege dynamic. Travolta and Slater's chemistry in particular was antagonistic, but with flickers of former friendship. It added a layer of tension that worked both on and off screen. Travolta, meanwhile, fully leaned into the chance to play against type, portraying Deakins as a charismatic psychopath. The supporting cast added even more texture. Samantha Mathis came aboard as Park Ranger Terry Carmichael, reuniting with Slater after Pump Up the Volume to give the central duo a believable bond amid the chaos. Delroy Lindo took on the role of Colonel Max Wilkins, bringing gravity to the military response scenes. Bob Gunton, best known for The Shawshank Redemption, played Pritchett, the money man backing Deakins' plan. Then there was Howie Long, the former NFL player, was cast as Kelly, Deakins' towering enforcer.
I say, goddamn, what a rush!
Broken Arrow was released in theaters in early 1996 and received mixed reviews from critics. While the action sequences and visuals received praise, critics felt the story was lacking. Variety described the film as a visually striking action thriller that lacks the moral and emotional weight of John Woo's earlier work. The New York Times dismissed the film as an exercise in bombast, while the Washington Post singled out Travolta's performance as delightfully over the top, though it noted that the film lacked substance. The Los Angeles Times highlighted Woo's skill in staging coherent action sequences in a Hollywood setting. Despite the divided reviews, Broken Arrow was a box office success. It debuted at #1 in North America, grossing $15.6 million in its opening weekend. The film went on to earn a total of $150.2 million worldwide. The box office performance indicated that the general public enjoyed the movie, even if critics were divided. The commercial success of the film helped further establish Woo's reputation in the American film industry. But making this blockbuster wasn't easy. This was a large-scale production that took over scorching landscapes and remote railroad tracks. The climactic train sequence in particular required extensive planning and logistics. For 6 straight weeks, the crew operated on a privately owned 40-mile stretch of railroad between Lewistown and Denton, Montana. They brought in specially built train cars and worked 12 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, coordinating helicopter shots, hand-to-hand combat scenes, and multiple timed explosions. The EMP blast from the nuclear warhead was achieved using miniatures and lighting effects. Despite the scale of the action, none of the actual train equipment was damaged, according to Central Montana Rail. Throughout production, Woo balanced his stylistic flourishes with Hollywood's logistical realities. The action wasn't just explosive, it was dangerous. One of the film's standout stunts involved a real Humvee chase in the desert, marking the first time military Humvees had been used like this on screen. Christian Slater was involved in several risky sequences. During filming, he accidentally fell off the back of a Humvee and was dragged behind the vehicle. In another scene, he slid underneath a moving train with only 2 feet of clearance between his body and the wheels, which he later described as pretty scary. A stuntman took things even further with a 200-foot freefall from a moving train off a bridge. Meanwhile, Howie Long's big moment involved a 300-pound ratchet pull slamming him through a wall, hard enough to leave wood in his nose. He shook it off and kept going. Even the hand-to-hand stuff came with risk. Travolta was reportedly nervous during rehearsals, afraid he'd actually punch Slater. The fight scenes were tightly choreographed, but the intensity never let up, and neither did the weather. The production faced constant rain and wind during the Montana shoot, especially around the moving trains and helicopters. The fictional B-3 stealth bomber was brought to life through a combination of an 18-foot model and digital animation.
Prepared to do
$250 million by 0900 Utah time. If you have not...
Good God. I don't know what the big
Broken Arrow was released on VHS in 1996. A DVD edition followed, with a Blu-ray release arriving years later. While not one of the most frequently reissued action titles of the decade, it maintained a steady afterlife through home video and television syndication. The film has also been made available through digital rental and purchase platforms. Like many action movies of the 90s, Broken Arrow also received a novelization written by Jeff Rovin, the same author author behind the book versions of Cliffhanger and Mortal Kombat. Over the years, the movie has carved out a strong following, especially among fans of John Woo's early Hollywood efforts, with Travolta's performance and the film's high-octane set pieces standing out.
Would you mind not shooting at the thermonuclear weapons?
Looking back, the impact of Broken Arrow is pretty clear. It delivered exactly what it promised. It was a hit back then, and for those of us who grew up with it, it still holds up today. The movie might not be perfect, but it's memorable, explosive, and full of moments that remind us why 90s action still hits differently. And if you thought Travolta was fun in Broken Arrow, wait until you see what happened when Woo gave him even more freedom and added Nicolas Cage to the mix. Join us next time as we dive into Face Off. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content.